You're listening to the Get Out and Drive podcast with John, Custom Car Nerd Meyer, and Jason, Old Car Guy Carr. We'll be bringing you gearheads everything you never wanted to know about cars and why they should be on the road and not in your garage. Are you ready to get out and drive?
Welcome back to the great episode of the Get Out and Drive podcast, and today we're talking a little bit of something different here. Now, even though we are into the late part of the year and car show season is kind of coming to an end, it doesn't mean that the end has come. We're pretty excited to have our special guest here, John. Why don't you introduce him and we will get right into the interview.
Oh, well, our great friend, Mr. Bob Ashton. He is the founder of MCACN, Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. I don't know offhand. I don't have it memorized. That's why we've got you here, Bob. You can tell us how long this thing has been running and how everything unfolded to get you to today.
Absolutely. We're pretty excited about it. We're entering our 15th show, 16th year for obvious reasons. But, this is the culmination of my lifelong dream, basically. I spent quite a few years as a show manager for Championship Auto Shows, which is the World of Wheels and Autorama people. And my passion's always been in factory muscle cars, American muscle, the 60s and 70s. That's what I've always loved. I was a little bit too young to grow up as a driver in that era, but my older brother was involved with that. My father was a longtime Chrysler employee, so that's where it all started, with my love of American muscle.
Well, Chrysler didn't make very many muscle cars, did they, Bob?
No, not too many. And of course, they were all just subtle green and brown cars too, as we all know.
Yeah, we look back today and we take advantage of the fact that cars back in the day were just cars. Some of them had big motors, some of them had 4-speed, 5-speed transmissions, and some of them, when something small happened, we parked them. And part of what MCACN does is a little bit of barn finding or highlighting barn finds. Let's talk a little bit about that, because people who don't know what a barn find is, explain what that is first, and then how it became part of MCACN.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting story, because our emphasis was always on super shiny and restored and all that type of thing. And of course, we have some very, very sought after high-end concours style awards, and with a real thorough judging program. But one of the guys who was a regular with us about our third or fourth year into the business was a big Corvette guy. He had a wonderful collection, C2 Corvettes. And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, Bob, I got this crazy car, and hear me out, but I have an idea and let me know what you think." I'm like, okay. Well, he went on to tell me that he had just discovered a 1967 Goodwood Green 427 435 Corvette in a garage that was parked in 1972, and had a really great story. The guy had actually parked it there because it was a horrible car in the snow, even though it had snow tires on it. So literally, the owner had parked the car in a regular subdivision, and there it sat from 1972 until about 2012. And he said, "Don't you think it would be fun to bring this car out exactly as it is, and show something that's been preserved and stashed away for a long time?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting." And sent me some pictures, and lo and behold, here it was, snow tires and all. And I said, "Do not touch that car. Don't clean it. Don't wash it. Bring it with the dirt on it. Bring it with the snow tires." And I got a great spot for it, and that's where it all started.
Wow, I've built and restored, and I've done preservation on a lot of mid-year Corvettes. I was involved a lot with the during the mid '90s Bloomington Gold cars, so I am well versed in preservation and reading the book. I think it is Cleaning, Not Destruction, or something like that is the book. Non-destructive cleaning, and we did a lot of that. And I'm also well versed in taking a lot of mid-year Corvettes that had disco van paint and all that stuff on it, and returning those back to Concours condition. I like seeing cars as found. I like seeing where they went, who they've been through. But go ahead.
Exactly, and that's where that started, and basically it was kind of a funny thing because as you guys know, I have several partners in the show that are all active hobbyists. It's really a neat program. There's 8 of us total, and everyone kind of has a specialized area of interest. So that's one of the reasons I think we've been successful is that each one of my partners is specializing in something different. So it's opened a lot of doors for me. But getting back to the subject here, they thought I was crazy when I said, "Hey, this guy called me up with this Corvette. I want to put it in the show." And several of them are diehard, super, super shiny restored guys. So they're like, "What? You want to put that ugly thing in here?" And I said, "Let's try it. Let's see what happens." And it was a hit. It was the absolute most talked about vehicle in the whole show. It had a crowd around it all weekend, and it's kind of like, I think we're on to something. So from there, put the call out to all brands and said, "Hey, what's out there? What do you have?" And that, as you know now, it is without a doubt one of our most popular sections of the show. And it's just fun. It's just great to hear the stories and the history and why did this car get parked and what are the plans for the future. And I think one of the most rewarding things for me for our show overall is that I think we lit a fire with a lot of people where a car may have sat for 15, 20, 30 years. And then all of a sudden they're embraced and they find out, hey, that car really is something. I really should bring it back to life. So we often have cars that start out in barn finds and then come back fully restored as one of our premier unveilings, which I've got 3 this year that are doing that.
I can't wait to see the Mod Top Daytona next year.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I've been working with Todd Savage on that car for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now with the eventual, it'll be there as an unveiling car. And we're super excited about that. Because again, a lot of people don't know anything like that exists. And as you know, it does. It's got a great story also. And we'll have a lot of fun with that.
Well, it's funny that we talk about these barn finds and how they come to be these classic restorable or preserved cars. There's so many people out there who don't get that sometimes preserving that barn find exactly how it was found either keeps it more collectible because of its originality. But then again, you got to outweigh the hundreds of thousands of dollars of man hours that it takes to strip every nut and bolt down and bring that into concourse condition. How is it that somebody goes about becoming a part of one of your shows? Is it invite only, or is this something that anybody can attend if they just register for the show?
Well, when we started out, it was quite a challenge because we are such a specialized type of show. And I tell people, like, I'm from the Detroit area, so of course everybody knows Detroit Autorama. And I always say, well, imagine the Detroit Autorama but flipped. Instead of having 90% street rods or hot rods and 10% stock cars, we have 90% factory stock cars and 10% modified cars. So it was kind of a challenge in the beginning, but now 15 years later, I'm actually finalizing our floor plan right now. I've got 82 cars on standby. You can imagine that. And now, when I say they're on standby, these are good cars that I would love to be able to have in the show. I mean, I've got a couple of Copo Camaros on standby. I've got 5 or 6 Hemi cars on standby. I mean, they're prime cars, and we just have gotten to the point where the demand far outweighs the supply. Good problem to have, but it's frustrating for me being a car guy, of course. But it's we keep the show fresh by doing that. We're very picky. But to answer your question, about 80% of the show is invited by me. I spend the whole year traveling all over the country, and I spend a few weeks in Arizona and California. And this year, kind of a neat thing. This is the first year we've had actual participants send cars from Hawaii. We have a gentleman with 3 Mopars. 2 of them just hit the dock in California, so he shipped them from Hawaii up to California to be shipped in the big orange truck. We have a gentleman joining us with a 67 Corvette for triple diamond certification from Germany, which is really neat. And 41 different states. So they're coming from all over the place, and it's really an honor to see people take the effort, spend the money for the transportation, and take the time off of work to be a part of the show.
Yeah, I believe there's. I was talking to some friends of mine at V8 TV. I believe they've got 8 cars coming up to you.
They do. Kevin and the crew, they're celebrating a huge anniversary. And
Yep.
another thing we've been actually anticipating for a couple of years, he was telling us the anniversary was coming up, and it was kind of like, we need to do something special. He's been a huge supporter of what we do.
Right.
He's our official videographer since day one. And, Kevin and Kelly are just awesome people. They're enthusiasts, they're hardcore. They love what they do, just like I love what I do. And so that display is going to be spectacular. They've got some great cars coming in.
Yep, they're going to be fantastic. And Kevin Otis, he's a great guy. And
He really is. And as I say, a huge supporter of what we do. We got a hold of him right at the very beginning when we launched. And I said, I need help with video and this and that. And now he's one of our hosts for our unveilings. And,
great.
Again, we have a great time with them. They're fun to work with, and his whole crew. So that's going to be a real fun display also.
I know you said you are in the Chicago area, but talk to our listeners and tell them how to get in touch with you if they were to want to get your car or get their car looked at for an upcoming.
Sure. We actually have an online application. So what I tell people, you can pre-qualify. So they can email me. My email's all over, but it's bashton426@gmail. If you're thinking, hey, I'd like to do that, not really sure, instead of just signing up and then having us reject you, if that was a possibility, you can pre-qualify. And our big thing is we want to keep the show well-balanced brand-wise. So although we do end up being heavier in a particular brand for the big three due to what's become known as the red carpet display up front, we intentionally rotate between the big three for that. So we're on GM this year with the big GTO display. But my goal is always to keep a diversified show so that the guy who might be into Mustangs is going to come in and he's still going to see some Mopars and Oldsmobiles and Chevys and AMCs and Studebakers that'll catch his eye, that'll be happy to see. So that's always been our goal, is to keep a diversified group. And you can apply, like as I say, you can apply online. And I try to match up our special theme displays, which we always change up every year, and keep the show interesting and fresh.
What are general parameters of? I'm certain people don't want to bring you their '87 IROC. But what are parameters? I don't know. That may be something that interests you, because the stuff's starting to go past the disco muscle cars.
Well, that's actually a good point. A couple years ago, we started our Malaise era invitational display, and when I decided to do that, obviously one of the goals was to appeal to a younger audience. We're getting older, and I want to keep this hobby going. And I'm fortunate to have a son and grandkids that are into it, but a lot of people don't introduce the hobby to the younger generation. So I'm very big on that. And I thought, well, if we have a smaller display devoted to what I call the Malaise era cars, which are, I consider that to be 74 to 87. So there's different people will say different years, but the low power, high impact cars, you could say, a lot of flares and stripes and graphics with not a lot of horsepower.
Decal horsepower.
Exactly. I'm an AMC Hornet owner, so I can talk from experience. Although mine's got a 390 in it with a few modifications, but that's the future of the hobby too, and we want to encourage people. So this year we have a Malaise era display, and one of those cars happens to be a 4,000 mile '87 IROC. So. Best of the best, we maintain our standards as far as having good quality cars. You won't see a driver quality 50,000 mile car with some bumps and bruises, but you'll see the best of the best. And that's always the goal. Now, with that being said, we have our barn finds, as you mentioned. We have our vintage certification program, which that is concentrating on preservation instead of restoration. So that is a little bit different angle also, and you can learn a whole lot from those cars. And I know this year we have, I think the cars range from 1963 on up to Well, we've got an 87 Grand National in the mix also, so it's kind of a wide variety there, but they're unrestored cars, so excellent to use for reference.
So, Bob, you mentioned that you've got children and grandchildren who are kind of interested in kind of what it is that you do. One of the mantras we have over here at the Get Out and Drive podcast is hashtag what drives youth. What is MCACN doing to help drive youth into what it is that you do, or showing off what it is that you guys do over there?
Well, I have to say this is one of the things I'm most excited about for this year. So, again, a few years ago, we introduced a program, we called it Future Generation. And I put the word out that we were looking for younger enthusiasts that were actively involved in a hobby, whether they're mechanically inclined or like to go to shows and whatnot. And the response was pretty good. I got 4 or 5 cars. Some of them weren't so shiny. They weren't real pretty. There were several that were. I had my youngest ever true car owner, who was 14 years old at the time, who brought in his 65 Barracuda. And again, this year, I have a 14-year-old. His car is super special. It is one of the 3 original 1969 Hearst Olds convertibles. So those who've been with us for a while remember that a few years back, we had a premiere unveiling from the Brothers collection with one of those 3 cars. Now, this young man is absolutely amazing. I mean, talking to him, the knowledge, the passion. I mean, this kid will tell you the history of Hearst. And, he was out in the garage with his dad. Dad's a car collector, and, realized that, hey, this kid's really into this. And lo and behold, fast forward, they found this car, and that will be one of the cars you'll see in our future generation group. I have 9 cars this year coming in. Of those 9 enthusiasts, they range in age from 14 to 21. I've got, we got some modified cars, 2 young ladies that are totally hands-on. In fact, I met a young lady by the name of Carly Kapler at the Carlisle Chrysler event. She had a bright blue American Motors Hornet caught my eye, and I looked at it, and I saw a little note on the dashboard that said, "This car is owned by 20-year-old Carly Kapler, who built this car, et cetera, et cetera." And I thought, I got to meet this girl. So came back a little later and met her and met her parents, and Dad pulled out the photo album showing when he taught her to weld when she was 15 years old. So just a great story, great family type thing. Now she is actually going to college to become a vocational instructor in the automotive field. So I think it's our job to encourage younger enthusiasts. I always tell people, when you see kids at a show, I'm a Mopar guy, okay? A lot of people know that. You own a 70 Cuda with a 4-speed pistol grip, and you see a kid peeking over into the dash, put him in that seat and put his hand on that pistol grip. I mean, plant the seed early. And I've been fortunate that my kids and grandkids have been surrounded by it, and several of them jumped right in. But it's our job to make sure we have a future in this by encouraging the younger enthusiasts. And as I say, for us, some of the cars that you'll see, I'm sure people are going to look at them and go, "Wow, why is that car in here?" Well, there's a reason. And you'll see 9 of them in a row, nose to tail, and some of them are super shiny and pretty, and some of them aren't. But idea being, these are real enthusiasts, and we want to encourage them to be a part of the hobby.
Of all the different cars, either barn find cars or 100-point correct restorations, what do you think is the most prominent or the most oddball or thing that catches your eye that you're never going to forget? Previously, what is that vehicle?
It changes every year. Last year we had a dual engine Oldsmobile Toronado that was built as an experimental car for Oldsmobile. So, things like that pop up that really blow me away. And this year, Ram Air 5 GTO that has factory backing. The one that I'm super excited about, the 64 Royal Bobcat GTO, that was the actual car that was on the cover of Car and Driver for the GTO versus GTO feature that they did back in '64. Now, the neat twist to that is the gentleman who owns it is from California. His first ride in that car was with Jim Wangers in 1964 when he was 4 years old. And he vowed, he said, I'm going to own that car one day. And now he does. I mean, it is that car, not one like it. So what a great story and what a great car. And that's our cover car for the magazine. And Centerfold Car will be handing out free posters with that. It's going to be on our T-shirts. So I'm really excited about that one. And the owner's just a super cool guy too. Just the whole thing kind of epitomizes what our hobby's all about.
Well, Bob, we've talked about what the show is about, where it came from, and some of the different options that people can expect to see at the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the upcoming dates and when people can actually go and see what it is we're talking about here on the show?
Yeah, we're in Rosemont, Illinois, which is suburban Chicago area. So we're about a half hour outside of Chicago. We are right next to literally the O'Hare Airport. So that's one of the things that really works out nicely, because if you're from another state, you can fly into O'Hare. No need to rent a car. I have 8 official host hotels with rates starting at $129 a night. So I work really hard to get good rates for our people, for whether you're a spectator or a participant. 5 of those hotels are right across the street, which is nice because you can hit the Rosemont community, and there's all kinds of things to do there. So I tell people, bring the whole family, bring your wife, bring your kids, because they have the Rosemont Entertainment District. So those who don't necessarily want to spend 8 or 10 hours at a car show, they can spend a few hours and then jump on the shuttle and go over to the 130 store outlet center. There's a Movico movie theater, there's indoor skydiving, there's bowling. So every kind of entertainment option is there for the whole family. And we try to make everything as easy as it can be and make it fun, so that it's an annual event that everybody says, I have to be there every year. Always the weekend before Thanksgiving. So that falls this year on November 23rd and 24th. And we're open Saturday from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m., Sunday from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. And we have a lot of fun. There's just a lot of activities going on. It's not just a static car show. We strongly encourage the owners to interact with people. We want you to sit by the car. We want to hear the stories. We want you to share the stories. We have seminars and talks, and I call them, I don't necessarily use the term seminar too often because that sounds like work. We have roundtable discussions, and we've got some legendary drag racers joining us this year. We've got Butch Leal, the California Flash, of course, Arnie Beswick. I mean, these guys are great storytellers, and we put them up on a stage and do kind of a Q&A type thing. We have 2 live bands. So Saturday night, we put some music out there. So if you get a little tired from walking around all day, we got a place to sit down and catch some live New Orleans style jazz this year, which is new, from a band called Sugo, the Wisconsin area. And then our good friend John Cramen from Meekum Auctions. A lot of people don't know he's a guitar player. So he's in a band called Redline 7000, which is a 70s and 80s style rock and roll band. And again, just designed to be fun. And it's funny to see people that know John from TV and from the Meekum Auctions, and they'll look up there and say, isn't that guy from Meekum up there playing guitar and singing? So we have fun with that too. Lots of fun. We try to emphasize there's a whole lot more than just pretty cars and shiny cars, because some of them aren't pretty and shiny, but they all have a story. There's just so much out there. Like, people say, what are you going to do when you run out of cars? And it's like, here we are 15 years later, and there's just more and more that comes out. And for us, I think it's very common for people to come in with a friend. There might be somebody who shows with us, and they've heard the stories and they've heard that it's a great show. But of course, everybody has a show says they have a great show, but they might come along with a friend, and then that person will say, wow, I should have been showing my car. And that's what's worked for us really well, is the referrals we get from other car owners and collectors that bring their friends along. And then here we are now, let's say 15, 16 years later, with just the ability to have a good, balanced, and diversified, fresh show every year.
I've really been working on talking with Eddie Gatton. He was one of our guests quite a while ago.
Yes.
And as you're familiar with Eddie, he's the current
Yes.
caretaker of the Stormtrooper Vega. And we really, really, really want to get that out of the trailer, get it to your show. And we said earlier, possibly this year, maybe I can work on him. And maybe if he shows up, maybe we can work on him together this year, because that car really needs to be up there.
It does, and it was kind of funny when I first started talking to him. He started explaining the car, and I knew exactly what it was. And with my background working in the custom field with the Autoramas and World of Wheel shows, I knew exactly what it was. And so that kind of broke the ice between Eddie and me when we started talking about it. And he's like, "Well, it's not as pretty as it used to be." And I said,
Doesn't
"You
matter.
need to understand our show. That car will be welcomed. It'll be an absolute hit. And as you say, it needs to be seen again, and the stories that'll be told. And that's we would be honored to have that car at our show."
Yeah, 1979, 1980, his dad closed the door on the trailer. All of the display, the lights, the placards, everything is the summer of 1980.
That's amazing.
And it's over with. And he said there's pitted chrome, there's tarnished copper, all sorts of things. I said, please do not touch it.
And that's the thing. I think it's hard for somebody to understand that a car like that, exactly as it is, would be such a huge hit. And I explained that to Eddie. I said, you don't want to clean it up. You want to bring that out. That's historically significant. And you can honor your father and all of what he did with the car, and people will embrace it. I mean, that was quite a car in its day, and it still is today. And I'm sure it'd be a hit.
Yep. We'll go ahead and put that interview in our notes for this one, so our listeners can certainly get the history on that vehicle. And I'll turn it over to Jason for closing.
Yeah. So remember, guys, if you ever want to get that project car of yours to the level of quality that Bob is putting on with his show, you need to start with the basics, and that's finding parts. And we have a great partner here on the Get Out and Drive podcast, and that's racingjunk.com. If you want to go over there, you can find a lot of parts that you may need to fix up that old car and get it to the showroom quality standards. And if you set yourself up an account, you can even sell your own junk over at racingjunk.com. The other alternative, John, is that if you want to go shiny and show quality, we've got other partners that help us out over here at the Get Out and Drive podcast. Maybe you can talk a little bit about them.
If you have a rusty vehicle and you need any sort of sheet metal parts for your muscle car, definitely head over to AMD. They have a wide variety of parts and pieces for your vehicle, and the fit and finish and quality is better than NOS. I've installed their parts hundreds of times myself, and just to take a look at a vehicle that was just almost jack up the VIN tag and build an AMD sheet metal vehicle underneath it, they have the parts available to do it for a number of muscle cars. So for any of your sheet metal needs, certainly head over to AMD.
So if you've been listening to this podcast for any time at all, you know that Racing Junk has been a long-time sponsor. AMD has recently jumped on board, so make sure you're checking those guys out for all your restoration needs. One more time, Bob, thanks again for being a part of the show and getting this time to interview you. I wish that I could be there to meet you in person in November when this show is taking place, but maybe next year we'll make it a priority for sure for me to come over and be there. John, Joanne, and Paul, I think, are going to make a trip up there to have a visit. So I thank you for being taking your time and being a part of the Get Out and Drive podcast.
Cruise on over to our website, getoutanddrive.com, for all the info you never wanted to know about our podcast. Hit us up on our listener hotline, be the first to know what's happening, get industry news, and grab your Get Out and Drive merch. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on Twitter at Get Out and Drive Pod.
What drives you?